Right. You have to teach. Yeah, it needs to be taught. Yeah. Hmm. That's true. Children have to be taught, and it's difficult to change it. And sometimes it's a difficult lesson to teach, but it has to be taught, right? So they have to learn respect, and especially when raising children. Yeah. So respect can go toward children, and that way they can reciprocate that, and they learn what it means to respect. Yeah. Hmm. Sure. Yeah, it's not taught in the home. So now that we've established the reason why we have the problem, which I'm not griping against, I think that's valid. So you grow up in a home that has no respect, doesn't teach you any respect, and now you're a Christian. How do you learn how to respect people? You just don't. One step at a time, by example. You can look at other people and see how they treat other people, and that's a really good one if you're actually tuned in to looking for it, right? Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's true. So you have to recognize the good in the other person that helps to foster that respect because you are a team and you're working together and you are, yeah, you're definitely shaped by that. So, that is a good tip, finding something in the other person that you can admire. No one is so reprobate that you can't find something about them that's positive. I know sometimes we might feel that way, but it's just not true. So we can find something. I think that'll help in this situation. Paul? We don't verbalize it like we should. That's right. We assume that they know, right? And that's not just your spouse. I mean, we just assume people know. Thank you. Yeah, that's true. And men are usually the ones that do that the worst, or do the worst offenders with that. Hmm. That's right. So once you recognize the need to have your own attitude in check, the next step is to figure out what actually is loving or honorable to that person that you're trying to show it to. I'll give you a really good example. When I don't remember how old we were, Carla had a birthday, and I bought her a laptop for her birthday, which she never used. I don't think she used it one time. And the reason I bought her the laptop is because I wanted one. And I figured that's a great opportunity to buy her a gift. She'll have it, and then I'll use it now and then. And I ended up using it all the time because she didn't want it. Well, there was an interesting fight over that one because I did. See, I was being thoughtful. I got it in her favorite color. And I honestly thought she will love this because I loved it. I thought it was a great thing. And she had no desire. She hadn't even really used a computer up to that point. That was also my little incentive to try to help encourage her to learn how to use it. But, that didn't work. So I learned a lesson. I think in premarital counseling, I don't know how many times I heard, don't buy your wife a present that plugs in. Well, that didn't plug in. It was wireless. So if you bought me a power tool, I would probably enjoy it. I'd probably appreciate it and love it because I might use it maybe. At least I have in my mind, I can envision myself out there with all the tools, building something massive, and I think I would be excited about that. But if I bought my wife one, it would not work out very well. Wireless tools, see? So yeah, she may get a wireless screwdriver next year for birthday. Mother's Day? No. Yeah, they're trying to be gender inclusive. I get it, and some mothers might, probably not. Most of them. So anyway, and it goes around the other way too. Have you ever gotten a gift from your spouse and you're like, thanks, I don't know what to do with it, right? So if you go and buy your husband, and you buy yourself pink matching jumpsuits, and you think, we're going to wear these in public because this will be cool. Your husband is not going to respond. Not appropriately, not what you want. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You get some good answers. Yeah, that's true. And it's something that we have to work on. It's not something that happens automatically. And if we take it for granted, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to work because we will treat people the way we want to be treated. And that is not appropriate. One of the things you said, Robert, was that we should go and look at what God says first. Respect for other people does not begin with respect for self. It begins with respect for God. With respect for God, you can have respect for yourself. But until you have a right relationship with Him, you don't have a basis, a foundation for proper respect. We can create respect, but we don't have a proper understanding of what it is. So a lot of parents feel like they have to gain respect from their children, which I don't want to get into childhood right now, but they do that because they want their kids to fear them. That used to be a major thing, right? You put the fear of them early. In fact, I remember joking about that, and I hear other people joking about the same thing. You got to get the fear of them, get your bluff in before they become a teenager. There is some validity to the fact that they have to be trained and they have to learn who is in control of the household before they become a teenager, because when they become a teenager, they're going to think they're in control of the household if you don't have that authority established already. But the idea of fear and fear-based teaching is not appropriate, although children should be more afraid of disobeying you than they are of wanting to do the things, especially as younger ones. But at the same time, let me put it this way. I knew a lady a couple that adopted a little girl, and when they got her as a baby, and they made the decision that they would never tell this little girl no. They would always find ways around it. And they said, we recognize that she can't have everything she wants. There has to be limitations, but instead of saying, no, you can't do that, we will say, oh, honey, you want to do this instead, and just take her away. And they said, well, they'll never hear no from us. I've never checked on that. I don't know if that actually worked. Because children have to have boundaries. It's part of their culture, part of their maturation process. If they have no boundaries, they cannot thrive. They'll have to create their own boundaries. And if you can imagine children creating their own boundaries, there's all kinds of wild things that can happen with that. Yeah.
In this country today, we have at least two generations in, and the parents are not, and the children are not, and the parents are not
Mm-hmm. That's true. So we just let them do whatever. No. So let's bring that around to spouses. Do you have the right to train your spouse? Depends on how you define the word train, right? I'm not talking about training children, but you teach people how to treat you. You do it all the time by the things that you allow them to do, or the things that you never stop, you never say anything, you never say no. That's not something that's going to be happening in my life. Is that appropriate? Absolutely, it is. And sometimes we get it in our heads that, I can't really tell my wife or my husband no. I got whatever they want to do, I got to do it. That's not honor and respect. Yeah, Paul? Yeah, so if you have no respect for yourself, then it's hard for your spouse to respect you too. I can see that for sure. So this is something that has to be asked. There's one of the things I don't know why, but for a long time I was hesitant to even think about it, was to ask. You're talking about how do you respect your spouse, or how do you show honor to your spouse? One of the best things you can do is ask. Because your idea of it is probably different than your spouse's idea. And to illustrate, there are different love languages that people have, right? There's physical touch, there's the words of affirmation. I think there's 5 of them. And basically all that says is that we're all different, and we all see and perceive love in a different way, or respect in a different way. And you need to try to find out what your spouse's love language is, so to speak, so that you can express it in a way that they would understand that, oh, this is me showing love. And there are a lot of things that we could say about that, but one of the best ways to do that is just open up and ask, right? What can I do? What is it? What are some things? And think practically, what can I do that would show honor or respect or whatever? And then don't be surprised if they say nothing or I don't know, but at least start the conversation and ask more than once, because you may get some answers. They may think about it and come up with some things, or maybe they'll come up with something that you're doing that they don't like, that you ought to change. That's appropriate. Or something that you're not doing that they wish you would. That's appropriate too. So however it works. All right. Any other comment or about this? Yes. Yeah. No. So you're saying you should show respect by wearing the pink jumpsuit? Yeah, if they buy it for you. Maybe I could say, honey, let's go get a different color, or let's try it in a different way. Let's not wear these outside. We can wear them for, these are our pajamas now. Yeah. But he was wearing it himself? Oh, I see. Okay, I got you. Okay, I got you. I was trying to understand that one. Okay, so that's all right. I didn't understand what you said. All right, so let's go ahead and, unless there's any other comment, let's go ahead and shift gears. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 7. One through 6. Now, concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. Okay, so based on the text here, what is the concession that Paul made? He says in verse 6, I say this as a concession. What is he saying that's a concession, not as a command? Okay, permission. What is he saying is a permission? Nothing. What's he saying is a permission? That he's allowing it, not as a commandment. The concession so you're saying that the concession is related to not depriving one another? That would mean he's saying, don't deprive one another, but I just say that as a permissive thing, not as a command. I don't think he's saying that, right? It does. Verses 1 and 2. It's good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each one have his own wife. So as a concession or as a permission, not as a commandment, each man should have his own wife. Now, why would he? Well, we know why he wouldn't say this is a commandment. Every man should have a wife, right? It's not a commandment, but it's a concession. It's a permission. It's an allowance. And the reason for that allowance is to help prevent sexual immorality, right? This is part of the process. But the point is that he is talking about this marriage as if it's something that's optional. And of course, we know that it is. And a lot of times we grow up and we think, well, the only option I have is I have to get married. And that's not true. And evidently, it's possible that Paul wasn't married. We just don't know for sure. He did talk about he had the right to carry around a wife, but that doesn't mean that he actually had one to carry around. But anyway, whatever his concession is, his place is, consider this in chapter 7, verse 26, where he talks about, I suppose, therefore, that it is good because of the present distress, that is good for a man to remain as he is. So what is the present distress that he would be talking about? Yes, they were going through a lot of problems and persecutions, and it was going to get worse before it got better. And they knew it was going to get worse. They were being told it was going to get worse. I mean, the book of Revelation reveals it for them. At this point, the Revelation hadn't been written yet, as far as I know, but the ideas were still there. And the Holy Spirit told Paul that he was going to be put in chains. There's all kinds of things they knew were coming. So because of that, and because of the problems they were already facing, he says, maybe it's better if you don't marry. It doesn't mean that you can't, right? I ran into a man who said that we shouldn't get married because of this passage. Like that's not what it says. It doesn't say we should or we shouldn't, or we must or we must not. It allows for the concession of it. And this is going to be a different situation right there. Okay, so who has the authority over the body of the wife? The husband. Who has the authority over the body of the husband? The wife. So we understand contextually what this is about, but it's far more than what he's talking about in this context. Do you have the right to control and force your spouse to do anything that they don't want to do. Not really. But you do have the right to recognize ownership. And if we have one, so we have the husband who owns the body of the wife, but we don't have the other way where we have the wife who owns the body of her husband, there is going to be abuse or possibility of it. Because you're mine, I control you. But we are each other's, right? And his point is that we belong to each other, and we should respect that belonging and that we have for one another. You say, yeah, well, it's my wife. I have the right to have her. Well, yeah, but it's your body is hers. You don't have the right to do with your body what you want to do. Your wife determines that. So there is this give and take, and vice versa, by the way, there. So he says, in verse 3, let the husband render to his wife the affection due her. Likewise also the wife to her husband. What does that word do mean? Does anybody have a different translation? Yeah, but what does it mean that it's due in verse 3? Does yours say due? Read the verse. Oh, okay. So that they don't even use the word due. What translation is that? I'll have to look into that. Let me pull that up real quick. New American says due. Duty. Okay. Let's see. We're in 1 Corinthians 7. Okay. Yeah, and the word in the original language means indebtedness, a sum that's owed, an obligation, a debt. That's the idea of the word. So you render to your spouse what is you are indebted to render, because this is not your body that you have, it's your mate's. That's the idea. So there's an owing that's there, and it should never be seen as an enslavement. That's not his point, because this is a decision of the person to give to the other person. And so the render to his wife the affection that's due to her. We understand that this is about conjugal rights, like you said, but does it have any broader perspective? Absolutely. So the affection that's due to your wife or your husband is something that goes far beyond that, and in fact, easily could be said, should relate to the attitude or the person itself, himself or herself, that you're trying to render affection to. That the idea of giving to them, you do that in the sense of, this is what they deserve, this is what I owe them, so I go and I treat my wife with honor and respect because she deserves this. She is due this. This is part of being married, and vice versa. So whenever I open the car door for my wife, it's not because she can't do it. It's because I owe her honor, and I need to express it somehow. And however I do it is going to be related to us, whatever shows the best honor in the best way or whatever. And that's a really minor thing. It doesn't really make that big of a difference, but it is something. In our attitude, we show respect because we decide to, but we also do it in relationship to, this is something that we can't just ignore. We can't just set it aside and pretend that it's not there. You know, it's like the man who went to, husband and wife went to the marriage counseling, and after 26 years, they're having problems. And the man said to the husband, do you ever tell your wife you love her? And you know the response. I told her when I got married, if I change my mind, I'll let her know. That's not affection that's due to your wife. That's not affectionate at all. I saw somebody's hand. Paul. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I've seen it a lot where women will just take abuse because they feel like, well, that's what I'm supposed to take. I mean, I'm the woman. I belong to him. So if I'm going to be submissive, I'm going to just take it. There is always give and take in the relationship. We always, I mean, I'm going to do things that get on Carla's nerves, but that's not the same thing as abuse. And if people are being abused, they need to tell someone else so that people can interfere. I remember asking a man one time, what would you do, an older preacher, I said, what would you do if you found out that a husband was beating his wife, one of the Christians was beating his wife, and he wouldn't stop even though you confronted him? Couldn't do anything with the police, whatever. He said, me and 3 guys would put on ski masks and go take care of the problem. You know what? That's not necessarily inappropriate. If you're trying to defend the life of your sister, there could be something to that. I'm not suggesting we go do that, especially not online, but you can at least see the rationale, the reasoning for it. Yeah, Garrett? Yeah. Continue to go on. Yeah, you're right. Some churches are complicit in the abuse. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. I'm not going to repeat that on camera, but yeah. Well, you could look at it as you turn the other cheek as you swing around to punch them. I'm just kidding with that one. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the point that we need to see, especially from what you're talking about with verse 4, is that one doesn't have authority over the other without the other having authority over them. So, yeah, I may have authority over my wife, and that allows me to do whatever I want to, but she has authority over your body too. So you can't just do whatever you want to do because she's the one who's in control of your body if you're submitting to God. So, yeah, that's true. And there's a lot of things about this that are important for us to understand. And we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So we're talking about the bond that we have in the marriage, that where we give up ourselves for our spouse, but it's also vice versa. And it makes it very difficult when one doesn't do that. There starts to be abuse, and it could go both ways. I recognize that men can be abused by women too. It's typically not physical, but it is still abuse. So coming back to what Garrett was saying about some churches can be complicit in that. Sometimes it can be taught from the pulpit that way. There's all kinds of things that can be said in the church. But it reminded me of something I was trying to remember that I've forgotten it again. The fact is that we can't be complicit in what's going on. We have to recognize that something needs to take place. I remember what it was. At PTP, there was a man who was talking about persecution, and he said, when the persecution starts, and I believe in some senses it already has to a certain degree, when persecution starts, the first person or two that loses his job for his faith will go, oh, what did you say? Were you a little too hard? Maybe you said some things. I've been working at my company for 20 years, and I've never been fired for something like that. I've seen it on Facebook. I have friends who have been in Facebook jail. Like every time they turn around, they're in Facebook jail. My question has been, what did you say? Did you say something that was inflammatory, right? Did you just go out of your way to make somebody mad? Because I've never been put in jail, and I've said all kinds of stuff. He said the first couple of people will do that. They'll lose their job. He said, but when you start seeing half the congregation, when half the congregation loses their job, then that's when you start taking it seriously. Because we start realizing it wasn't an isolated incident. So my point of that is, if someone comes to church and says to you, I've lost my job because I'm a Christian, never dismiss it lightly. It doesn't mean that it's true. They may have been a jerk. I've given you examples of how people do that. It may be true. They may have been jerks. They may have deserved it, but it doesn't mean that they did. So if someone comes to you and says, my husband or my wife is abusing me, never dismiss it or say, well, what are you doing? Always take it at least seriously enough to start looking into it, finding ways to figure out, okay, how can we figure out how to help this situation? Because you don't know what's going on. The person that is doing the abusing might be the most outgoing and social person you've ever met. They may be, everyone loves them. They couldn't possibly believe that they're doing all these kinds of things. I know many people who have abusive or had abusive marriages where by the husband, extreme abuse. I mean, lots and lots of terrible things happening in that household to the wife and the kids. But you would never know it because that person was extremely popular and everyone loved him, and they would never believe that anything like that could be done by this kind of person. We've all been that way, right? Or we've all seen that, at least, when we're talking about that. So this is what we're looking at. As far as that goes, if there's abuse, we need to find out, get to the bottom of it, and this is when I'll be glad I'm not an elder if this thing comes up. Yeah, Robert? Yeah. Correct. Yes. That's true. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's the whole point, is to stop sin, not introduce more. Yeah, obviously. And obviously, men are not allowed, or women too, are not allowed to go outside the marriage. That's pretty obvious. Um, that's another one of those things that come up when the husband cheats on the wife. You know what the first question that the wife will hear is? Were you meeting your obligations? Why? What are they doing? They don't want to believe that somebody would do that without a good reason. Well, the good reason might just be that he's a jerk. It could be that. But no matter how your wife or your husband treats you in that matter, that doesn't allow you to sin. So no matter how your wife or husband treats you in any way, we never have the right to sin, because we have no choice. You have choices. All right, so remember, he's saying this, I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. In verse 7, I wish that all men were even as I myself, but each one his own gift from God, and this one in this manner and another in that one. So in verse 8, I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it's good for them to remain even as I am. Well, there's some pretty good evidence of what Paul was like. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. It's better to marry than to burn with passion. So I think it does relate to sexual immorality. That's the reason he introduced the question. And you're right, somebody had come to him from Corinth with a list of questions, and we don't see the questions, we just see the answers, so we kind of have to surmise what that's about. Let's see here. Let me see if I covered all the questions here. Does a husband or wife have the right to disregard the needs of the other? Now, what I mean by disregard is have the ability to supply, but chooses to disregard the spouse. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, that's possibly the reason they got married, or at least one of the reasons they got married in the first place. So that's true. And we would say no, that we don't have the right to disregard the needs of our spouse. Our spouse cannot force us, but we have no right as a Christian to look at our spouse and say, I know you need this, but I'm not gonna provide it. Yeah. That's true. He's good at it. Yeah. There's always a spot where we can have a weakness. Just a second. Garrett? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So blatantly disregard is often done for punishment and other things. Well, okay, we know how that's going to work. You get to sleep on the couch, right? So, yeah. Oh, okay, good. One last, okay. All right, well, thank y'all very much for your comments, and we'll pick up there next week.